We are Heather and Paul Christie.
And for over 12 years, we've worked with executives and entrepreneurs to accelerate change in every aspect of their business.
Because we are in the fastest paced business environment that anyone has ever seen before.
So join us for the Evolve to Win show. Hi, and welcome to another Evolve to Win show with Heather and Paul.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to be back.
It is.
We're talking today about where you can guarantee you find yourself surrounded by leaders, because we know that one of the single biggest contributing factors to your success is your environment and who you surround yourself with.
I'm with you on that.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. So where do you find it? Where are you guaranteed to find a room full of leaders?
Well, I know because I was just there today.
Okay. What'd you do? What'd you do this morning?
So I'm part of the allocations team for the United Way, and I had the opportunity, every year I have the opportunity to go to the United Way Center, and we approve, what are they called?
The financial allocations.
The donations, yeah, right, to certain charities, organizations. And there's always a room full of always really great people, really great leaders. And I thought, boy, that would be a great topic to talk about, because I know a lot of people, whether you're in sales or you're in some type of leadership role or you own a company, you are always looking to meet, like-minded people that are interested in the same things as you, and also are maybe you're not going to meet at a normal networking event. So volunteering.
Well, there are so many different benefits to volunteering, right? To community service. And when you think about your level of service currently, there's sort of a rule of thumb here that if you want better results, you just find a way to serve more people. So they go hand in hand. So there's not only the emotional currency that you get, right? There's that feeling of service and what that brings for you, which is just massive. But then you think about the other aspects that maybe people aren't always thinking about. And some of the other benefits of serving is the environment that you put yourself in, right?
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Oh, okay, I'd be happy to. Well, so I'll just talk about some of the interactions that I've been able to have.
And you have a lot of experience because you've volunteered a lot throughout the years. And actually it was a huge part of, when we got down here in 2004. 5.
Well,
6?
we got here in 4, but we really sort of came out of our cocoon in 2005.
Yeah. And when we got here, it was, that was one of the first things that we did as a team, just getting out there and volunteering and going to a lot of networking events, and you were getting on board. So tell us a little bit about that, Heather.
All right. Well, you're right. When we first got down here, so we got down to Florida. People ask all the time, why did you leave your jobs and move to Southwest Florida? It seemed really crazy at the time. And when we did that, we did not actually have a plan for what we were going to do other than we were going to start our own business. That was it.
Right.
And so when we came down here, we did a lot of work and research to figure out what business we wanted to be in. So we looked at startups, we looked at existing businesses for sale, we looked at franchises. We did the whole song and dance, right? And we ended up finding a franchise that was just the perfect match for us. That franchise was Action Coach, and it was in the world of business coaching. Now, at the time, I didn't even know what business coaching was, and I don't think you really did either, right? It was new.
I thought it was a busing company.
Yeah, seriously. People used to think, oh, Action Coach, you own a bus company? Yeah, that's how new it was back in 2005. Now everyone's got a coach, right? Yeah. So it was kind of we were early adopters in a brand new industry. When we first moved down to Southwest Florida, we only knew a couple of people down here, my grandparents, my aunt and uncle, and none of them were actually in the business for coaching. So we had to really figure out how to get known within this community. And so the very first thing we did is we joined the chamber. We started meeting people.
Right.
We started looking for very intentionally different places where we could serve. Now, when you're looking for, if you're not currently involved in community service in some way, shape, or form, and you're thinking about doing this, but there's just so many organizations, you don't know what to do or how to go about doing it, I recommend first things first that you find an organization that you're passionate about. I mean, that is so critical. I would never go to serve on an organization's board just because there were people who I wanted to hang out with on that board. I would start by figuring out what it is I'm passionate about and where I want to give, because Yeah, you have to give authentically. So what we did is we looked at a number of different organizations that were very big in our area, and we chose one that was, an organization that we were passionate about. And I already knew somebody who was on the executive committee there. And so I asked how I could serve. And the very first thing he said is, well, I'd like you to be an Emerald sponsor of this event. And it was a $2,500 check. And at that time, we had just started our business. We had not worked for over 6 months time. So we were traveling Europe. And so writing that $2,500 check
I was
was
giving
like
you
a
pushback
big,
on it too. Because I'm pretty is it skimpy with our?
No,
I'm pretty tight with our money. Yeah, we're pretty tight with the money. And
you
so
were
I was
tight
like,
with the checkbook.
I was like, what?
And I said yes.
$2,500? You kidding me?
And I said yes immediately.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I said yes, of course, was because the organization we were donating to was a great organization and it would benefit that organization tremendously. But the other reason I said yes is because I recognized that this person on the executive committee needed to know how serious we were about supporting the organization, and were we going to get behind it, because people who served on his committee were behind it. So it was tough to part with that money when we really didn't have it to give, but we gave. And I never looked back, because as soon as we became Emerald sponsors, he asked me to serve on the executive committee. So I surpassed a lot of the years that I might have been serving on other committees, and went straight into a leadership committee. And again, it wasn't that we paid that money just to get me that position, because that was not the deal at all. And in fact, we didn't even know if it was going to happen, but it's what ended up happening, because he saw how genuine our interest was. And he also knew we were new in business. So he must have known that was sort of a hard check to write. But
that was a great lesson for me in that, and you continue to do it. And I'm always pushing back on making that investment, but I'm getting much easier now when Heather comes to me and says, hey, we have an opportunity to sponsor a particular event, or maybe it's going to a conference, and there's the VIP or like the diamond section that you get. And I'm always kind of like, oh, we can just sit in the general section. The thing I have learned is that when you pay for that position, you pay for that
to attend any seminar or conference.
You're going to be around people who are investing in themselves at a high level. And so, we've gotten a ton of business that way. We've gotten a ton of contacts, a ton of people that referred business to us, that we've done business with. So there is something to be said about that. Yeah.
And so when you think about serving, the first rule of thumb, of course, is to find an organization that you're passionate about. And, you can even Google it these days. It's so much easier now to find volunteer organizations that are a good match for you. One of my favorites that I ever served was way early on, when I was a wish granter for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. You remember that back in Chicago? So this was back before I really understood the whole deal about community service and what it was all about. But I'd heard about this organization called Make-A-Wish, which is such an awesome organization. And when they talked about the different roles that were available, I wanted to be at the coalface. I wanted to be working with the children and granting their wishes. And it blew my mind that I could actually do that as a first step. So that was my entree into that organization. So I actually got to interview these children who were diagnosed as terminal. I mean, that's how you get to have a wish granted, is you have to be diagnosed as terminal, which there's just so much emotion that goes in, along with having those conversations. Right. Yeah. But I remember, we'll tell one story because it's just such a cool story. One story in particular tells me that I was in the right place at the right time for all the right reasons. I had this young lady who had a brain tumor, and she had been diagnosed as terminal. And I remember I went and I met her for lunch with her family, her mother and her sister. And I was asking, what is your wish? And, what I had learned by then is it was really difficult for kids to come up with the right wish for them, because sometimes they were worried about the cost, or they didn't want to ask for something that was unrealistic. So when I first started working with this young lady, she was talking about maybe getting a computer. She was talking about having something that was an object, a possession that she didn't seem that excited about or inspired by. So I started digging a little deeper and asking her more questions. And I asked her, was there any place that she'd ever dreamed of going that she hadn't been yet? And just like that, she said, yes, Paris. And then all of a sudden I saw her light up for the very first time during our conversation. And so I started asking her about it and what was it about Paris? And she was just telling me this dream. She literally had this dream about going to Paris.
Yeah.
And she wanted to go with her mom and she wanted to go with her sister. And so I said, so what do you think about making that your wish? And she was just, like her eyes were wide open. Like she never thought that that was even a possibility for her, right? So we start building this dream. And I said, so what is it that you want to do in Paris? And she talked about climbing the Eiffel Tower and that kind of thing. And then she said, well, there's one thing that I really want to do, but I know it's something that can't be done, but never mind. And I said, what is it? What is it? She said, well, I've always had this dream about taking a hot air balloon ride over the city of Paris. Now, this is a girl who's like, I want to say she was about 12 years old at the time.
Yeah.
And I sat there for a moment in just stunned silence because I had some girlfriends who actually lived in Paris at the time. Elisa and Sarah, my friends from Chicago, who were really good friends of mine, lived in Paris. They were working in Paris. And so I had been traveling to Paris every summer to go see them for Bastille Day. And I learned a lot about Paris, and I got to meet a lot of their local friends and their expat friends. Well, the crazy, like, it's not even a coincidence. It's much larger than that. I think it's just totally divine. The crazy thing is, I had met just that last summer a woman who flew for FedEx, whose hobby was flying hot air balloons, and she lived in Paris. What? So when I told the little girl that I might be able to help her with this and that I just happened to know somebody who flies hot air balloons in Paris, you can imagine that she didn't even believe me, right?
Right.
And you can't actually even fly hot air balloons over the city of Paris. There are some restrictions there.
Sure.
But the long story short is that I reached out to my friend Elisa, who reached out to Nancy, and Nancy created this whole thing. And as far as I understand, underwrote the entire thing. And that little girl got to live her dream. So you think about what that did for me. Now, that was not about being involved with a bunch of other leaders, which is one reason you serve. That was literally just about the emotional experience. The benefit, the value that I got from playing a part in this little girl's dream is something I'll never, ever forget.
Yeah, that was a great start.
Yeah.
And did you ever talk to her after that?
No, never talked to her after that. And, it's really interesting
because even though kids are terminal doesn't necessarily mean they with that program with the Make-A-Wish, a lot of kids survive. Actually, my half brother, Ryan, had leukemia when he was maybe like 7 or 8 years old, and he was given a wish through Make-A-Wish Foundation, and he's still alive.
With us today.
Yeah, he's still alive.
And healthy and happy.
Yeah, he's doing great.
Yeah. So I don't know what happened with her. And that's, one of the parts that I miss about that whole interaction was I felt like I had such a bond with these kids, but I just played the one role, and my role was to be a conduit to help the wish happen. And then it went over to the next team to really coordinate and make the wish fulfilled. And then the next team to follow up. And so, so it wasn't like, it wasn't about me. It was about them.
Yeah.
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 Anyway,
and
really cool.
Just to kind of switch gears back to, multiple reasons why you want to get part of an organization or volunteer is that, like I experienced today, I don't get out of the office that often. And I have to say it was Monday morning. Wasn't really excited about going up to Fort Myers.
Are you kidding to go see Cliff Jones?
I was.
You kidding? Of course.
It was great when I got there. And actually, it was such a beautiful day. But I got there and I was just like, wow, look at how many amazing people that are part of this team. So this allocations team. And I mean, there's partners in CPAs, there's owners of companies, there's, engineers, financial advisors. I mean, just a whole gamut of different people that I got to meet again. And it's every year. So I've been doing this now for 3 years. And it's just great. And
you get to, as part of the allocations team, because you actually got me involved in that as well. I did it for the first time last year. For those of you who don't know much about United Way, United Way is a phenomenal organization that basically supports other organizations and agencies within our community. Amazing. And so if you know about United Way, you probably know about the United Way thermometer, right? That's what we think about, which is like, that should be a topic of an entire other show because it's so awesome. The United Way thermometer, they set a goal every year, and then as the dollars come in and the funds come in, they reach their goal, and they track this using that big thermometer. So a lot of people know that, but they don't necessarily know what United Way is.
I never knew what a United Way was. I mean, the only reason I knew about it was back, I don't know, maybe the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. United Way was like the major sponsor for the NFL, or sponsor of the NFL. And I'd always see United Way and see little kids around in the commercials and stuff. And I was like, I still had no idea. They really didn't do a good job of explaining who they were. And not until I got down here did I realize what the United Way does. And they're a catch-all for all of the donations. And then they allocate those donations out to, deserving organizations and charities that are making an impact in the community. So they do a fantastic job.
And they also run that, I think it's 211. God, I hope I got that right. The 211 number, which is kind of like the emergency hotline if you are in need, if your electric's about to be shut off, or anyway, they have so many different services. And by the way, they're also a fantastic liaison to figure out if you need help some way, somewhere, where to go to get that help.
And that's a great point, because there's a lot of people that, have family members or whatever, and they don't know where to turn. And I know we've even been in that situation before, and you've given Cliff a call, or you've called the 211 number, and we've used their services, because they will hook you up with the right type of organization that can help you in that particular challenge you're having.
And you would be blown away by how many organizations exist just within your community, and you've probably never ever heard of them before.
There are so many of them.
There's so many.
And they're so niched out to particular needs. It's amazing. And there's money there, and there's help there, and there's volunteers that will just about do anything to help you through your situation. So
one of the great things about United Way too is they're keeping tabs on how these organizations are being run, and they're making sure that they're giving donations, contributions from the community to these organizations once they've hit certain criteria, right? So they're making sure that they're not being mismanaged. I mean, it's a phenomenal organization.
The United Way of Lee County, they raised over $10 million in 2017-18.
That's amazing.
I mean, I think this is the first year they've broken the 10 million.
Wow.
I mean, that's a boatload of money.
A lot.
Yeah.
And be thinking too, so there's a lot of different ways to serve. Obviously, we always look for the 3 T's. You give your time, you give your treasure, or you give your talent. And there were definitely times in my life where I didn't feel like I had the spare time to go and serve and take a major role. And maybe at those times we were more giving money than we were serving and sharing and giving our time. But the other thing that I think is really important too is that, there are some people who are just serving all the time and serving everywhere and constantly giving to the point where it might actually be impacting them, right? Like giving too much. So if that's you, if you tend to say yes to everything, and you will, when someone says, oh, can you chair this committee, or can you get on this board, and you're just saying yes, 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 without thinking. And then you go back and you're kind of kicking yourself because you bit off more than you could chew. Here's a rule of thumb. I'm going to give the tip, which is like, oh my gosh, the best tip if you're super high altruistic like that. Here's your new rule, should you choose to adopt it. It goes like this. Someone asks you to do anything that takes up your time or your resources, and you say, thanks so much for asking. Would it be okay if I got back to you on that? So all I want you to do is just don't feel like you need to give an immediate answer. For those of you who know that that's your default and you have a really hard time saying no, I want you to really consider just saying, thanks for asking. Would it be okay if I got back to you? And, give them a time frame, and just buy yourself that time to really look at your resources. Because what I've learned is I'm so much more effective when I really, really allocate time to the service on a board where I know I have the time to give and I can give it my best. And I have said no to some really fantastic opportunities in some amazing organizations because I knew that I had already said yes elsewhere. And so I just want you to be thinking about that, because it's no good if you're totally out of balance and if you're constantly giving and always saying yes and you're not taking time to do whatever else it is you really need to do, or if you're pulling your time away from the organization that you really want to serve because you've spread yourself too thin. So use that trick, buy yourself some time.
Yeah, and that is the number one trait for great leaders, is knowing what to say no to.
Totally true.
Yep.
That is totally true. So tons of benefits from serving. There's always, of course, the emotional reward that you get from serving.
Yep.
And so when you combine your service with something you're truly passionate about, there's just no higher reward, right? So that piece is awesome. The environment that you surround yourself with, especially when you're getting to the level of serving on different executive committees and boards, whether you're in a regional organization, a state organization, or a national organization, it's kind of like those opportunities as they come up allow you to surround yourself with people at different levels of leadership as well. And I can tell you, I have learned some incredible leadership lessons from those who lead volunteer boards. So you think about influence, right? And what it's like when you have a title and you're influencing someone because they're paid to report to you. But how about when you're leading a volunteer board and nobody's paid anything to work with you? So the only reason they're doing something for you is because they like the organization a lot, or they're really influenced by you as a leader. So you really get to see some of the best leaders, right, and how people show up and they're excited and they just go all in. And then I've also had the opportunity to see what happens and what not to do and what doesn't work, where literally boards have alienated. They have stopped serving. They've stopped showing up. They don't participate in conference calls. They don't show up for meetings. They don't even show up for the big national meeting. Right. What? So this is such a great lesson in leadership. So wherever you are in your career, you want to learn more about how to be a great leader, go find some of those boards where you've got tremendous leadership and see what they're doing.
So thank you for joining us on another Evolve to Win show with Heather and Paul. We hope you have a great day and a great week.
It was great to be with you guys today. Take care.